thank you for staying here with me. I'm going to talk about Dungeon Masters. First of all, I want to thank the organization, all the sponsors, the organization for having me here. I'm one organizer, but that's different. So title of the presentation is What I've Learned by Dealing with a Dungeon Master. How many of you have played RPG? Okay, that's great. So the Dungeon Master anti-pattern is something that, oh sorry, I forgot. That's me. Yeah, currently I'm leading a team at Broker Genius. I've come from fintech, I've done e-commerce, classified ads, I've done even some research on computational linguistics. Okay. The goals today is to identify this Dungeon Master anti-pattern, which is not my idea, but I think it's a cool idea. I want to share with you what worked and what did not work when I found myself in this situation, in which you have someone who you can name a Dungeon Master. And also I would like your feedback. If any of you have ever been in a similar situation, how did you react? How did you deal with it? How you dealt with it? Because sometimes it's complicated. So, yeah, that's what I was trying to introduce. What is the Dungeon Master, right? There's an article by Alberto Brandolini. It's titled The Rise and Fall of the Dungeon Master. And, well, he describes the anti-pattern there. Usually it's someone who can be the author of the original software. How many of you always get to work on greenfield projects? Always. Right. So that means that you're most probably working on something that somebody else did before you, right? Or it's a person who's entrenched with the software. They know everything. They are the go-to guy. They are the Bob the Lizard in the company, right? Whenever there's a problem, they know the solution, or they have the best idea about it. And usually they do have minions, right? So going back to this idea of RPG, the Dungeon Master, for those of you who have never played role-playing games, it's the one setting up the game. There used to be, I am from '74, there used to be in the '80s Toon series, which was called Dungeons and Dragons, which it was also an RPG game. Oops, not working. There. So, how do we get a Dungeon Master, right? How do we get into this situation? Well, maybe, as we were saying, he built the system. Does this work? Yeah. Maybe he was the one who started adding features to a legacy system. Maybe you were the second guy, or or maybe he was promoted to some role that we will see in a moment. So let's check types of Dungeon Masters or roles that where you can find a Dungeon Master. Brandolini in his article talks about the product owner as the Dungeon Master, or the Dungeon Master as product owner. It can be a tech lead. If you are the guy who knows everything, sometimes even if you don't want, you become that. The project manager, maybe, or what we would call with this I don't mean that domain expert is a role, by the way, just in case there are some DDD practitioners here, but sometimes I just don't want, I want to avoid that confusion. Or maybe it's just, you, a software developer, you happen to be the one that. Okay, so how can we identify a dungeon master in our organization? Well, usually the dungeon master gives too much information, a lot of information. We're mixing domain knowledge and our own interpretation. There's another trait, which is defensiveness, or resistance to change. The dungeon master will get defensive. If somebody tries to give new ideas, they are, oh, wait, why do you want to do that way? It's always been done like this. Sometimes there will be too much focus on implementation details. Oh, no, you cannot do that because we've always been using this other system, right? Call it, I don't know. Where do we find them? Well, Brandolini talks about rewrites of the original system, which I guess it's his experience. My experience is more in a legacy system that is being refactored. So I'm going to explain you what Brandolini mentions for the rewrite, and then I will share my own experience. So the dungeon master in a rewrite, he mentions that there are three possible outcomes for a rewrite. When we say rewrite, we mean do it from scratch. We have already domain knowledge, so maybe we can do it right. So what can happen is that the new project is doing great. It's way much better. So this is going to expose how bad the old thing was, how much money was lost. So for the dungeon master, that's not the best outcome because it puts the dungeon master in a difficult situation. What can happen is also that the new project is a little bit better. It's not huge performance gain or maybe not a huge business gain. So, this will raise the question, why did we do this? Was it really necessary? What can happen also is that the new project fails. How many of you have been in rewrites that were thrown away? I haven't, but I've heard of people who have. It's not a good situation, but for someone being a dungeon master, this is sort of good for their ego. They did better than you, right? So I'm going to propose you a scenario, okay? But please don't take me wrong, okay? For me, this was some sort of difficult talk to give. Because if we start twisting things around, it can be understood as giving bad criticism, okay? That's not what I want. What follows is an account of my own experience. I've been lucky enough to spend the last 4 years in another company with a great team of developers. Take it as a description, not as judgment. Let's work with that. So let me depict a little bit the scenario. Let me give you some context. Let's just say that when you get there are no active developers, okay? There's no testing culture, no DevOps culture. The guy who did everything happens to be the boss. And of course, it's a legacy system. And let me explain what I mean by legacy system. It's kind of slow, this. Okay. So legacy, as I said, no testing culture, of course, no tests. All deprecated version of the language being used. I don't know how many of you are doing PHP? Okay. So PHP 5.2. That's like 10 years ago. It's a big ball of mud in the pure sense of the word. Pull one string, everything breaks. And of course, we had a monolithic repo. Let's up the ante. Let's add some pressure. Dungeon Master is in command. I want this now, in 5 hours, by tonight or tomorrow. No planning, no nothing. Even if we remove that one, if you fail, there are going to be losses for the company, right? Nobody wants that. We're good professionals. We want the company to do better, right? So, let me explain to you what we learned. So, things that did not work. Suggesting infrastructure changes up front, this idea of going there, oh, but you don't have this, you don't have that. I liked a lot what Mancuso said before. You need to give value proposals. It's not just, I'm going to use this because it's cool, right? One example of this was, we knew we needed to migrate database. It took 1 year to migrate the whole thing. Suggesting tooling delivery changes up front didn't work. It took us half a year to change the deployment system. And it took us 1 year to get working continuous integration. There were other things that did not work. Are you familiar with the term cowboy coder? Cowboy coder? Okay. Sergeants, rock stars, prima donnas. Does it sound familiar? Okay. So it didn't work. I'm going to explain a little bit what each of these are, just for the sake of completion. So cowboy coders are programming who write code according to their own rules. That's actually, you can find it in Cunningham's wiki page. The idea is basically the metaphor of the cowboy, right? The cowboy needs to care for their cows and what's the name? Cattle. So if they have a problem, they need to fix it, right? They need to get the whole livestock from one place to the other. They don't care about if it's good or bad. As long as it works, they just... The sergeant coder, I don't know if you're familiar. There's a very interesting book, The Mythical Man Month. This is on software engineer by Fred Brooks. This is a really old book, and what amazes me is that most of what is explained here, it still applies. So the sergeant on the team is the rockstar programmer, the one with 10 multiplied by 10 or more speed, skill, ability than the average team member. Then later we can discuss if this is, considering that someone has their productivity multiplied by 10, if that's good or bad for the team. But that would be the sergeant. The rockstar or prima donna. The definition for me, and I want to make this clear, is because some others, this is what I mean when I say rockstar. Someone that parties all night, comes in late and hungover, has weird contractual demands, thrashes the hotel rooms on business trips, and then that someone was saying, okay, then if that's that, I'm a rock star. For me, rock star programming is that. Someone who's going to be very expensive, it's going to do their thing, and then they just don't care. I'm leaving out. I already did my gig. That's it. So why didn't this work? Because by the time that you have the cowboy, sergeant, rockstar, prima donna done with their work, when there's a thorough review, not just of the code, but of the whole process and for what has changed and what not, you find that, oh, but you didn't do this or you didn't do that. There are new bugs. In the case of the sergeant, because they're supposed to be so good, yes, everything is in their mind, but now you're left with knowledge silos, right? Other things that did not work. Extracting domain logic from implementation. How does this work? I don't know. Go and check the code. Okay. This is like having someone explain to you the movie Lord of the Rings and then pretending that you've read the books. Not the same thing. Also, most times implementation would be buggy or simply wrong. Once we went to check with someone from business. Brandolini also gave us some strategies about how we can deal with a dungeon master. How to solve that conflicting situation in which you have someone where there might be some sort of power dynamic between them and you. Part of the problem is already expressing in them and you. But pretending that it's a technology problem, that's one of the ideas that Brandolini gives us. For us, it didn't work because when we finally had everything ready to move to newest technology, other anti-patterns would emerge, right? I'll talk about those ones also. Prioritizing money first, thinking money first, okay? I mean, you did your thing, it was good, thank you very much, that's what got us here. But if you still want to prioritize business and value, let us now do our thing, for example, right? It didn't work because in my case, that's what got us there. I want fast, quick solutions. I want quick return of investment. Making them part of the team didn't work, also because of some of the reasons that Brandolini points out. All ways of doing things, the dark side, let's just test this. And let's not test. That kind of stuff was never gone. So, is this? Oh, sorry. So, separating paths didn't work either. It didn't work because of other anti-patterns. But there were other things that were positive. Okay, I started with negative. Let's go to more positive approach. By passing the dungeon master, let's just say that it sort of worked. And as I said before, it led to discovery of other anti-patterns. Basically, what we did is we tried to proxy all communication. And it did work a little bit. But because of this, we still needed a huge deal of collaboration due to lack of business knowledge, that kind of stuff. But still, that was what started getting us on the way to do good things. Also, doing slow architectural changes in the code, how we were structuring the whole code base, the monolith, and trying to add good ideas. So what we were doing, our strategy came to be, okay, we're going to add new features, but as we're going along the way, we're going to be introducing new tools. So as I mentioned before, continuous integration. We even changed how we were deploying Well, as I said before, I said no DevOps culture. Deployments were awful. We automated them. I mean, we try to make our life easier. In the end, that's what we want. We even sort of created our own framework, which is something that I hate, but sometimes that's what it is. That helped us speed development to the feature, and that opened the door to other changes. As I said before, that opened the door to, okay, let's move away from that and let's do some other things, right? Something that also worked, I talked about surgeons before, performing surgery in the sense of, the seams that, for example, was it feathers? Feathers, yeah. Microfeathers describes technique for trying to introduce testing, and we called it surgery because we were actually, very, very, very careful. The problem we had with the surgeon was that if that surgery is applied and stays only in the mind of the surgeon, it doesn't help. We needed to share this knowledge among the team. The other thing that worked a lot was questioning the status quo, asking why are things this way, why, right? This was the most beneficial. It helped us realize where we had code telling lies. As I said before, one of the reasons that trying to get domain knowledge from code is as someone explaining you a movie from a book. This helped us a lot because then we would be able to confront the dungeon master, and sometimes he would realize, okay, actually that's wrong. If that's what it is, it's wrong. Most probably it was never tested, never questioned, so thank you for doing this. And that would give us also opportunity to fix it. What we did do, we used the implementation to challenge that domain knowledge from the dungeon master. Sometimes the dungeon master would explain to us a story about what's going on in a specific area or bounded context, if you're doing DDD. And being able to go to the implementation and actually check, okay, they've told me this goes like this, now I can check, now I can test. It would prove, sometimes the dungeon master would say, oh yes, I forgot. There is this special rule, this special case, blah, blah, blah. Sorry. This is what I think helped us the most. Finally gathering that business knowledge. Finally understanding business needs. Once you understand business needs, we started being regarded as peers by the dungeon master. It also was useful when we had to face feudal disputes, and this is part of another anti-pattern that I will explain later. Because at least we had a criteria to understand what was going on. Okay, so how does the dungeon master affect a team? Well, one of the things that we found was, and this is why I'm convinced that this is a pattern, an anti-pattern, sorry, it adds confusion. Too much information is no information sometimes. Also during the beginning, since the dungeon master needed to be involved in every major change, we were not feeling empowered to take our own decisions as a team. Sometimes even if we wanted to do surgery in what we would call the right way, sharing knowledge among all of us, and everybody was aware of what was going on, he would become a blocker because, yeah, the dungeon master knows the solution, just that one solution, right? And And when you try to follow that path, you would find, okay, that was a misdirection. Let's go back to square one. When I was reading Brandolini's article, I was all the time thinking, oh yeah, that's that one person in my organization. And suddenly I realized, oh, maybe I was kind of, or maybe I was becoming a dungeon master. Why is that? Because when you spend enough time in a project, you learn where all the traps are. You learn where the bad things happen, you know, where you have huge amount of complexity and where it's even if you try to set some of those traps, there's no way that you're going to remember to set them all. And the other problem is that as the team grows, you're going to start making assumptions that, well, everybody knows this, so it's okay, right? It's not. And in the end, sometimes, maybe out of pressure, or maybe you will perform surgeries yourself without telling anyone, without, you know, or maybe asking for someone for some review, but still you're creating a very small knowledge silo, but it's there, and that's a problem also. And all of a sudden, you find yourself doing, you know, giving too much information details about surrounding problems when you should be just focusing on the problem at hand. Explaining all the workarounds that you have for, oh yeah, but this is special, this is different, this is, you know. And you try to protect newcomers from the traps that you remember. Oh yeah, don't go there. Don't do that. I'll take that ticket. I'll do, you know. I was lucky enough to have someone in the team who started asking questions. Why? Why are we doing this? How is it that we came to this situation? Really, why? You know. Why are you talking to me about this problem now if we were talking about that other problem? So, is the dungeon master an isolated anti-pattern? I think it's not. In my experience, it's not. Because when we got rid of some of what Brandolini describes, we found other things. And this is what I've seen in recent work experiences. How many of you are familiar with the term intellectual violence? You know, it's when you work in a team. How many of you do Scrum? How many of you do planning poker? Do you know why you do planning poker? So one of the reasons why we do planning poker is to avoid intimidating others with our knowledge, right? So if I am going to bet that this is a 5-story point, and if I have, well, there's a very interesting experiment that, it's a psychology experiment. They get 5 people, and there's one guinea pig, in the sense that he doesn't know he's been set up, and they have someone compare lengths of lines, right? And they agree that the first 3 persons are going to say that the shortest line is larger than the other one. 3 people are giving the wrong answer, and 4th comes our guinea pig. In 75% of cases, the guinea pig says the wrong answer, right? That's how we give into intellectual violence. One of the reasons why we do planning poker is because of that, so that I can think myself of the problem and throw a card without being conditioned, intimidated by what others might think. That's intellectual violence.
Discuss the cards later.
Yes,
They don't match.
exactly.
That's very
But
Sure, violence comes back in.
you're right. It can happen.
Later problem.
Right. Exactly. So we found this also happening. Using knowledge to intimidate others in a meeting. Oh yeah, but I know the system does this and that and that. So in the end, that's not good. Irrational management. Delaying, as we were saying now, delaying decisions or problems and not making a strong decision. Okay, we're going to do this way. If in the end you need to comply to a deadline and nobody's making a decision, in the end you end up with de facto decisions. Why are we doing this? Because all system was like this. Oh, who said it was right? We asked, but maybe nobody answered, right? Blowhard jamboree. Having experts telling you what you need to do because it's cool, hype, whatever. Context is very important. Okay. If you're curious about this, there's a very good book on anti-patterns. It has 3 different sections. It's called Anti-Patterns, the Survival Guide. And there's a specific section that describes others. Not only this, but other anti-patterns, software anti-patterns, like when we discuss is singleton a pattern, is singleton an anti-pattern. There are also project management anti-patterns. Okay, so by now I hope that we agree, or maybe if you don't, please, let's discuss. The Dungeon Master is a complex anti-pattern. And that it might be surrounded by other project management anti-patterns. I wanted to give you some hints on how to identify it, how to give it a name, and when we have a problem, the fact of us being able to talk about the problem, it's already part of the solution. Well, and these are the 2 references that I was using for this. Thank you, guys. If you liked, please do not forget to rate the talk. Hope you're doing that for all other talks. That's where you can go to rate them. And if you liked these illustrations, tweet to this guy. Let him know. He's an old colleague. He took the time to make it nicer.